Okay. Thank you, Jim. Jim McCord.
Thank
Uh,
you.
we never met in person, but we talk so much online that I feel that you are an old friend already because we have been through some similar experiences and recently in similar ventures. So we participate on this project to put together a book of 27 different stories of people that ran or walked across America. And I'll put a link to that book right here on the description of the video. And and we are going to talk about this and everything else we feel like. Sorry. Also, this is a sharecast. That means the same video will be on my channel, will be on his channel. So we encourage you that. Sorry, what is that?
That is my new favorite drink, bubbly. You're drinking
It's
a
one of
beer,
my
I'm
favorite.
drinking a bubbly.
Yeah, I'm
What
drinking
is that, a
beer.
Heineken?
Yeah, well,
Heineken?
it's a green beer. I'll not tell which one it is until they pay me. I'm not doing advertising for free. I'm not James Bond.
Good for you. I will do bubbly advertisement for free because it's that good. But hey,
Uh,
Milton, first thing I got to do is apologize to you. And you may or may not remember, but on your first crossing, Milton, you crossed America twice. You
that's
ran
right.
across America twice, and I only know three other people that did that. But on your first one, I was following you daily because we have
Hmm.
this group called USA Crossers, and you
Yeah.
were part of that. So that's how a lot of us started following you. And I was on your site daily because I love following crossers. And I promised you, I actually I committed to you that when you got directly south of Cincinnati, which was going to be like Alabama, that I
Hmm.
would come down and spend a half a day or a day with you, and I never did. And every time your name pops up, either in our book or we message each other, I always feel so freaking guilty that I didn't go down and visit with you because I was so looking forward to it. And who knows, life's like this. So maybe I was in one of these spots. Maybe I don't know
Uh-huh.
when you were directly south, but I do apologize. So please accept my apology for not
Uh,
meeting with
you have to make it up to me one day by visiting me, or I'll visit you, and we are going to drink together and walk. We'll walk some trails, and and then all sins will be forgiven.
you. Count on it.
All right, that's very good. So where are you? You said you are near Cincinnati.
Yeah, I live in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. It's
Hmm.
just about a mile and a half from Cincinnati. So the only thing that separates us and Cincinnati is the Ohio River. So
Exactly. So
yeah.
that's where people go to gamble and to buy cheap booze,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they opened a casino a few years ago. Yeah, I'm not into gambling at all myself, but I know it's done very well.
Many years ago, I went to Cincinnati for a job interview, and I remember the some of the employees in the company were very graciously hanging out with me and showing me the city and all that. And they asked me, "Hey, do you want to go across the river? Like we can buy cheap booze, we can go to the casinos, and I don't know what else they offer."
Yeah,
Um, so I knew for that reason.
yeah. Well,
But
years
I love the area. It's cold, but to me that's not a deal breaker. I used to live in Boston, so I'm okay with that. It's very beautiful there.
Midwest is there's a few things unique about the Midwest, and it's not unique to Cincinnati or Northern Kentucky. But and I don't hate to say it. I'm kind of proud to say it. People are generally they're friendlier
Hmm.
in the Midwest than they are on the East Coast or the West Coast. There's just not as we're all strangers, but Midwest people are a little bit more open. So that's one thing that I love about Cincinnati. And the other thing is, you know, whether it's business or whether it's a fad or whatever, almost everything either starts on the East Coast or the West Coast. And if it starts on the East Coast, then it jumps to the West Coast, and gradually gradually, eventually, it comes to Cincinnati. So, in a way that sucks, but in another way, it's an incredible opportunity for those of us to see what's working on the East and West Coast and take advantage of it before it jump in, before it gets.
You learn from their
Yeah.
mistakes first.
Yes.
Yeah, I was watching some time ago a video about language, and the host was explaining that there was some study done on the way people talk and the speed of their conversation, and they developed some software that would listen to you talking about anything, and by your with a very high precision, by the timing of your speech, you could tell the population density of the city where you live. There is a direct correlation there. And people on the East Coast, if you think of New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, they talk slightly faster than you do in the Midwest. And I remember I always thought that it's the way you talk is more clear over there. The way they talk in the South, imagine Oklahoma, Tennessee, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, it's even slower.
Yes.
Population density even more scarce, but they have more intense accents, so it may be a little more difficult to understand, but you can really see that difference in pace. And the more you go to the middle of the country, or you go to the Dakotas, and it's clearly different.
Yeah, those of us in the Midwest, we claim to be, and I'm sure everybody does, but we claim to be the population that does not have an accent. We don't have an accent. We're the normal ones.
Not much. You are
Which is,
closer. You're closer to the TV accent,
yeah,
right? To the news, TV news accent.
yeah.
I would say I can. I have been living in America for some 20 years, 22 years now, and of course I can recognize some accents.
Well, where were you before? Where were you before that?
I was raised in Brazil, and then I have been back since '98, and then I went to Europe a lot in recent times. So that's why my accent is all mixed up. It's
doesn't
South
sound
America,
like
Eastern Europe, and
yes.
then when I in the places that I moved to in US were Miami, which doesn't give you a proper American accent, and then I moved to Boston, which doesn't give you a proper American accent either. So my accent is not even there is not even a melting pot there. It's more like a tossed salad.
I certainly thought you were Ukrainian or Russian. I think you might remember me telling you that.
Yes. Yeah, I hear that a lot because I pronounce the words in such a way that fits a specific dialect in Portuguese and Russian. So even though I'm not good at Russian yet, whatever I pronounce, I tend to pronounce relatively well. It's very easy for me to do the sounds and do the pronunciation in Russian really, really well.
So how many languages can you attempt to speak or understand?
I'm happy you said attempt to speak because I'm not very fluent in many. I'm very fluent in Portuguese, and so fluent that I can do some 3 or 4 variations of Portuguese. With a little bit of practice, I can even do Portuguese. But I can do some 3 different dialects from Brazil, and I'm fluent in English, and I understand. I can survive in Russian and French. I understand Italian. I don't speak well, but I can understand them talking, and I can read Romanian. And recently I discovered that I can read Norwegian. also
Uh,
by accident. It's because once you know like 3 or 4 languages of different roots, you can get a magazine or open a website in another language that you don't know, and you can understand it.
so
So I was
what was your first language Portuguese? Is that your native
English
language?
and Portuguese came parallel together
I envy
when I
you,
was a kid.
brother. I cannot pick languages up.
Oh,
I tried about 12, no, it was probably about 15 years ago. My daughter did 27 months in Honduras, and
yeah.
she was down there for the Peace Corps. And I could not visit. She couldn't have a visitor for 6 months. So I went 6 months in one day. I went down to spend 2 weeks with our daughter in Honduras, and I wanted to surprise her. So I ordered these CDs, and I put them in my computer. And every night I would study Spanish. And I
Hmm.
was going to surprise the shit out of her and go down speaking fluent Spanish.
Yeah. When I was talking the language, I totally somehow forgot to mention that I am not fluent, but I'm close to fluent in Spanish. I understand everything and I can talk. I just I just don't feel comfortable doing complex explanations in Spanish. I know Spanish by living in Miami, and so it's street Spanish. It's not horrible, but I'm not going to try to explain my political views or philosophical ideas in Spanish. It's not that good.
I would be interested in your philosophical opinions, but I have no interest in anybody's political opinions. Zero, zero.
Yeah.
I love philosophy. I hate politics.
Actually, I talk I talk politics very rarely, especially in person. Occasionally, I post something online, but I rarely do anything in person because uh, generally I don't like the level of the conversation. I don't like conversation that is quick. So if someone is asking you something and you only have a minute or one opportunity to express your point of view, it's going to come across all bad. It's not going to be easy. You are not going to explain anything. The other person is not going to be usually even listening.
Right.
Very often they are just waiting for their turn to talk anyway. So it's a waste of time. But when I get together with people and we have time, like we are cooking together, having a dinner, and we can explore the issues really slowly and ask questions to first uh, elicit what it is that you actually think about it, and then start digging into why you think about that. Why does that concern you? And then what are the reasons that you have a certain belief? The belief I rarely care about, but the reasons are really interesting. What are the emotional and intellectual basis for your positions? Those conversations are fabulous.
I
And
agree.
I love to do that.
I
But
agree.
that requires, to discuss anything, we're talking about an hour or two at least. you know so I like to do that while I'm cooking, and I cook a lot. So sometimes I have friends that I avoid discussing politics with them explicitly. I tell them, I'm sorry, I don't want to talk. But when I'm cooking, then yes, because I know we have 2 hours ahead of us. And also we have to deliberately slow down. If you have an opinion, and that is a ideological divide between us, the only possibility that I'm going to understand you is if I slow down, and I start with the presumption that probably I'm going to learn something from you. If we get with that attitude, then we can develop a lot. We can discover a lot. And also, I noticed that many times you get surprised by how much you agree with the other person. Because when you try to talk in sound bites, they seem to be conflicted. But when you look at the reasoning, so maybe you have a different opinion about immigration, but then when you look at what it is that you fear or what it is that you hope or what are how is your reasoning, we may end up discovering that we agree on 98% of it, you know, and disagree just in detail. So I love to take the discussion to that level. And that applies to politics, to religion, to anything that is difficult.
I can have a political discussion or even religious. I love religious discussions if it's with someone who understands that there is not one right way. You know, like I grew up thinking there was one right way because that's the way my parents brought me up. And I think most of us grow up that way. But it's so obvious to me and to a lot of us that our beliefs, political, philosophical, religious, are based on our upbringing and our personal experiences. And that's nothing else. Nothing else. So if I were born in a different culture, in a different religion, I would have completely different beliefs. And I didn't choose where I was born. And so when I'm in and I know you're like that, I don't even need to ask, but when I'm in a conversation with someone who understands that, I love religious, political, and philosophical discussions. But when I'm in a conversation with someone who has not traveled quite a bit or who believes that there is only one right philosophy or one right religion, then I'm just out of it. There's not even any point having a discussion. I have nothing to learn, nor do they.
Yeah. That confirms the idea that our beliefs can be very different, but our reasoning and our motivations are usually very similar.
Yep.
Usually, and that goes across cultural lines because and national lines as well. Because at the end, we are all being pushed around by the same forces, you know, by the same human needs and weaknesses and desires, and our vices and our passions are so similar. So we tend to be, in that sense, we tend to all be the same. The other day I read, I'll put a link on the description to this little how do I call that, an article called The Egg that Andy Weir wrote. That's the author of The Martian. And in that story, he tells it from the first person, but in the story, he is God. So I'm not going to try to tell you. I prefer that you guys read it. But basically, he says this: like, you died, and we meet, and then through the conversation, you ask, so what's going to happen? And I God explained that you're going to go back, and you will
reborn.
You will be reborn, and so you go again through it, and you think, so the Hindus were right. They said, yeah, well, actually they are all right in some way, but you're going to be a Chinese woman in the 7th century, whatever. I said, but you're going to send me back in time? I said, well, time only exists from your point of view. You know, from my point of view, it doesn't matter. And then you ask, so what if I meet with myself? You know, what if you send me to a situation that is contemporaneous to my previous life? I say, well, that happens all the time. I meet myself back in life. I said, that's all that happens because there is only you. I said, what about all the other people? I said, that's all you. It's you in other interactions of it.
Yeah.
You know, so in fact, there is only you and me. So every person that you interact with is you, just doing their own turn of it, right? And Joe Rogan also, in a comedy bit, he said something similar, that maybe we are all the same person. We are all one person, but our consciousness can only experience one at a time. So we can only remember one at a time. and and regardless of the metaphysics of it, if it's correct or not, I like to think that way. Because if I think that we are all just one, it gets more difficult to hate. It's
Hmm.
more difficult to be condescending.
Right. To judge.
It's easier to figure out that, maybe the forces and the impulses that are driving your decisions are the same that are driving mine. It's much easier to find that commonality if you think that we are all the same. And
And we are.
also,
We are. I tell you what, we're here for two reasons: to gain pleasure and to avoid pain. And
mhm,
really, no matter what else it is that you might throw in there, it fits into one of those two categories. You
tends
know.
to be, yeah. You can organize it that way too.
Yeah.
Yes. So what else? What else are you doing there other than philosophizing?
Well, I'm 62 years old, so I've got a lot of crazy experiences, and I was raised a Catholic, and I was a very strong Catholic, which is what I was telling you. I was sure that that's the way to be,
Mhm.
the correct way, because that's what my parents taught me, and they certainly were teaching what they were taught, and that's what the Catholic school nuns and priests taught me,
Mhm.
and then through life experiences, you grow up and you go. I got a degree in business management and started working and got in these careers, and most of my careers have been sales.
Mhm.
Uh, and then at the age of 23, I got married, and over the next 5 years, we had 4 kids. And Amy and I were married for 14 years, and then we were divorced for 14 years, separated, well, truly divorced.
Mhm.
And now for the last 8 years, we're back together. So I'm back with my ex-wife, which is, a unique experience in itself. And we're both very happy. We have the exact same problems we had when we were initially married. We just, there's no question, they're all still there. But I'm old enough and wise enough and mature enough to realize I'm not going to change her, which I
It,
tried to do the first 14 years.
it's the
And she's,
triumph of hope over
yeah,
experience.
yeah, I'm not going to change her. I'm not going to change you. I'm not going to change my kids. I'm not changing anybody, and nobody's changing me except
Uh-huh.
me. And
Mhm.
so anyway, she realized that. So after 14 years apart, we ended up getting back together. That's unique, but we're both very happily in love, and so that's
Cool.
that's kind of cool. And then I spent most of my career in real estate. So I've sold real estate for 27 years. I'm still licensed. I don't sell real estate anymore. About 5 years ago, I wrote a real estate book, A Revolution in Real Estate Sales, and it
Mhm.
quickly became a #1 bestseller. So a couple years after that, I quit selling and I started coaching realtors. So now which I love, because as an agent, when you're a real estate agent, you have listings and buyers. Here
Mhm.
in Cincinnati, you have to be here. But as a real estate coach, I'm coaching agents all over the country, and I can do that from anywhere in the world that I have internet. And three of our
Mhm.
4 kids now are, all 4 kids are grown. 3 of them have children and live out of town. So I visit our kids frequently, and I love being able to work from wherever I am.
That sounds excellent. Um, I so you mentioned that you're raised a Catholic. Are you still a Catholic? Do you still feel like
Uh,
that?
no, it's funny because, I told you this situation with my wife, ex-wife, and wife again now, but
Mm-hmm.
she still is a very strong Catholic, and I'm
Uh,
not. And I'm not. I don't go. I go to weddings and funerals at the Catholic Church, but that's it. I don't, and I don't, I'm not opposed to any faith. I think they're all good, and they all have kind of like what you were saying earlier, that we're all one, and all those faiths have much in common. They really do. So I don't believe in any particular religion, but I do very strongly believe in some kind of spirit, some kind of positive spirit in the world. So no, I'm not a Catholic anymore, but my wife is. She goes to church every Sunday. I usually drop her off and go get a cup of coffee and get on the internet
I
and
am I am
pick her up an hour later. How about you?
I am an ordained minister of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. So that means I'm a Pastafarian. Uh, And that's true. I can even officiate a marriage in the state of Florida. Um, but but in a personal and serious note, I am a what is called a Christian atheist. Are you familiar with that term?
What?
I'm a Christian atheist.
Christian atheist?
Yeah.
No.
It's a modern term of people that they realize that even though they are atheists, they realize that their moral code inherits a lot from the Judeo-Christian, uh, the evolved Judean-Christian set of values, and then they improved on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just basically a rejection of the thinking that you can be non-religious and say that your moral code is completely self altered. That I decided the rules and this is the way that I think, and it has no connection to any religion. I don't think that it's even possible, because the rules that you end up choosing a set of rules for your life, and when you look at those rules, they usually match, like in our case, living in our Western world, they match Judeo-Christian values by a very high percentage. Just happens that we decided to take the rules in our own hands and then improve upon them.
Yep.
But we didn't start from zero. So there are certain very basic values and principles, like the idea of that life has a certain special meaning or a special value on its own, and that means that it has to be respected on that principle alone. In religion, it comes from the thinking that it is so because God gave you that life, and so it belongs to Him, not to you. But even though I don't believe in that story, I still think in my moral code, I believe that your life has a special meaning that is above utilitarianism. So that means I agree and I appreciate ideas like basic human rights. So the basic human rights or certain basic principles are more important than democracy. That means they cannot be voted away. That's one of the things that I really like about our Constitution, the way that it's upside down in relation to all the other, pretty much all the other countries, is that we presume that you have all the rights, that you have all the privileges, that you own yourself. So that puts the individual above everything else, and that really matches my moral code, my own system, and that is straight out of Judeo-Christian system.
If I were to go to my library of books back at my house, the only spiritual leader that I've followed for the last 25 or 30 years would be who I have the most books and who I still read to this day is Gandhi. And I love Gandhi. I love a lot of Gandhi's quotes, but Gandhi's favorite quote of mine is, I love your Christ. I do not like your Christians. I like your Christ. I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ.
Yeah.
And truly, I think that
it's a fan club in a lot of ways. Yeah. But that Genji is a character that I'm pretty convinced that I don't understand yet. I have to talk to someone that really understands the history of that character, because apparently it has a lot of really nice quotes, but a very controversial history.
There is some controversy there. There definitely is
a lot, but I don't want to approach the subject carelessly. It's very easy to broach it. So I want to one of these days find some really good books about it, and then talk to people that knows that history very well and can put that in the right context.
Well,
I have.
I tell you, I'll interrupt you just for a minute only because
Mhm,
I was so disappointed the more I learned about Gandhi when I found out some of the things that you're referring to.
mhm,
And it was really devastating to me because I really held him up, But I've come to realize that Gandhi is no different than you or me or Jesus, if there was a Jesus, and I believe there was. He's human and he has flaws too. So for me to hold those personal flaws against a great man like Gandhi, who has done the fantastic things he has because he's a human being and he fucked up like we all fuck up, you know? So
mhm.
I think we all need to be careful of that because,
Yeah,
everybody has flaws. There is not one perfect human being. There never was or never will
yeah.
be.
No, yeah, but some of those flaws are gigantic. But I don't know if that's the case with him. That's where my careful attitude is based on. I really don't know. It's like I was reading about Churchill recently, and which is another character that is very admirable. We think of very highly of him. But the policies of England during that same time regarding their colonies was pretty brutal. Uh, and it's very difficult to imagine, to, to simulate in our minds how it would be otherwise. Because the problem in the problem and the solution in a lot of this is that everything you have to compare with the alternatives. Everything. There is no such a thing as a comparison with nothing, right?
Right.
Because nothing is an alternative. So if you imagine, for instance, something that I'm very familiar with is the interventionism of America, of the United States in South America during the 60s and 70s, because that's the story of my family and the story of my life while I was there. And so I had a lot of contact with that, and I am very familiar with their usual points of view on that subject. And it's another history that is very turbulent. But you have to compare with the alternative. What's the alternative is if we didn't do it, and if we didn't occupy that power space, then the Soviet Union would have done it. And I believe clearly, especially after spending a lot of time in Ukraine, I really believe that the result would be unimaginable. Uh, it would be so much worse, even though this, let's call it a victory, even though this victory was built on top of a lot of bodies, the alternative is so horrendous that I don't want to even contemplate that. It's terrible. If you just spend enough time today in a country like Ukraine, I spent a lot of time just in Ukraine and Bulgaria, uh, and you can still feel the weight, the presence, the psychological results of 70 years of Soviet Union. It's so clear. You see that through their psychology. It's not just their politics and their politicians that are still like it's a it's a drama movie. It's like Game of Thrones over there. But you can see that on the decisions and the risk adverse attitudes of everyone and the way the things work, the language, the choices of words, the way they use social media, everything reveals the dysfunctions that are the result of 3, 4, 5 generations of Soviet Union.
Our
If
youngest son went to his first degree is 4 years in Russian from St. Andrews in Scotland, and he spent a year in Russia. He spent 6 months Moscow and 6 months in St. Petersburg. And I really regret that I didn't visit Sam when he was in Russia.
Hmm.
But he knows it well, and he speaks similar to what you're speaking about when it comes. He's been to Ukraine a few times, and he loves visiting the Ukraine. But you sound a lot like him.
Yeah, I love Ukraine too. I end up having so many friends there. Maybe I have more friends in Europe than here right now, uh, because I've been there like 2 or 3 years, but they are recent years. So develop a lot of connections there. But it's so clear that the psychological scars are all over the place. Um, it's on the way they talk, it's on the way they think. Um, and for
Well,
us that we but to really see that, you need to be there for a few months, I would say. You need to ride the subway, you need to eat at their cheap restaurants, you need to talk to them, and listen to and observe the way they make their choices. And usually two things will happen: you become very aware of the horror of communism, and you will fall in love with them. They are they are some of the most, I don't know, some of the most lovely people I know. It's very difficult to explain that, to explain how you can like a culture so much. I don't know. A people, a collective of people so much. They are in the way that they are friendly, that they are simple, terribly ignorant, and at the same time so talented. You find them. It's a country that was isolated for so long, and now that they discover the world, they are fascinated by that as well. But when they talk to you, they really look at you, and they ask you questions, and they pay attention. Like you see that they're listening to you like you have never been listened to before. It's a genuine curiosity that you feel as a Westerner. You really feel it. And when you're talking to people that you're building friends and you're being introduced to more people and all that, you realize that they have an immense heart and immense suffering, and but at the same time they have a sense of humor that is it's interesting, it's exotic, it's a sense of humor that is apparently a mix of tragedy and optimism at the same time, and I end up learning to love that.
question I have to ask you, Milton,
Hmm.
since you ran across country, America twice,
Yeah.
and you have this love for the Ukraine and Eastern Europe. Well, I, why? I know you did do a motorcycle trip over there. I remember
Several.
that from your Facebook.
Several. Yeah.
Yes, but how come? Why would you run across America second time as opposed to maybe running, through Europe?
I was never curious to run through Europe. Never. It never. That desire never built up. What I was curious was to do El Camino de Santiago in Spain, and I did in 2016. Actually, I did half of it. I didn't do the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
The plan was to do like a little and see how I'm liking it, and then do a little more. I was never super committed to go to the end of it, and I did about half of it, and I thought, that's enough. I'm happy. Uh, but to understand why US happened twice, you have to remember that those two trips were of very different nature. The first time was a life-changing experience. I wanted to change my body. I was happy with the way my mind was being built, and the way I think. I was comfortable with that. My career, finances, everything was going well. I just didn't like that I looked like Homer Simpson, and I thought that it's incongruent. I don't feel that this is right, and also because of my lifestyle, I didn't have any trouble. I would say during the last 20 years or so, I never had any trouble finding company. So approaching the girls, getting girlfriends, or anything like that, or married. I was married a couple times too, but with different women. Getting married or finding girlfriends or any of that was not a problem at all. So I didn't have the social pressure of having to lose weight or be athletic or look great or anything like that because I wanted to get laid. It was that pressure was not there. So the only pressure that existed was my own self-criticism, that I would look at my life and think, wow, everything's going kind of fine and I'm liking it. But I cannot look at the mirror. So the first time I wanted to fix that problem, and I'm not very good at moderation. The idea of going to the gym, I actually went to the gym many times in my life. I like to joke that I lost thousands and thousands of pounds over the years, but I thought, no, this doesn't work. It's not my personality. So I was looking for some challenge, something that I could measure myself against. And one day I saw on TV that Eddie Izzard, one of my favorite comedians, he ran around England to raise money for a charity. So he did 47 marathons in 51 days, a total of 1,100 miles, something like that. And we are about the same age in the beginning, about the same weight and similar injuries. In many ways we were similar. We are just like a couple months apart in age.
So how old were you then at first time?
38. So I thought, if he can do that, and he was not a runner before, so I thought, if he could do that, then I can do it. I understand that he had a lot of people around him for training and support and all that, but I can probably do the same without all that money and support. I will just have to be a little more creative.
And a little slower.
And slower, yeah, exactly. It was pretty clear to me. Yeah, I cannot do at the same pace that he was doing, because he prepared better than I did. So I put that idea in my mind, and I was in Boston. I sold my house there, and I was finishing moving. So I got on my motorcycle and prepared to drive to Miami. And I stopped in New York to visit a friend, and I told him, he was the first person that I told that I'm going to run across America, and he didn't laugh. He looked at me and he said, "You mean it? Is that real?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay then. So you promise me that before you do anything, you read this book." And he gave me his copy of Born to Run. And that is the only book that I based all my strategy from. It was inspired not based on the book. It's not a book exactly about how to run, or well, it is, but not in a way that I could really apply. But it's a book that really puts forward the idea that before you learn how to run, you need to learn how to love it. You need to discover passion and enthusiasm and fun first. If you are going to start it suddenly and when you are old, or anything like that. You didn't grow up doing laps on the track in school or anything like that. So it was the perfect formula for me. I learned to love first. So I got the book and I kept driving towards Florida, and I visited a friend near Panama City. And while I was visiting him, I told him that I was going to do this. He also didn't laugh, but he said, "Well, how many years are you going to prepare for that?" I said, "I'll prepare for like 4 or 5 months." So, "How much are you running?" So I didn't start yet. Okay, so that day I went to Facebook and I told all my friends, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to run from Miami to Los Angeles. And then that day I did my first day of training. I ran about a quarter mile and I had to walk back. That's what I could do. Okay, but with and then 3 days later I got to Miami and settled down in my new apartment in South Beach. I chose a place in South Beach to make my training easier because I wanted to do all the training there. And so I started training the day after, and in 2 weeks I did a 5K, and I'm talking distance. I'm not saying that it was fast, but I did a 5K in 2 weeks. I did a half a marathon in 4 weeks. In 6 weeks I did a marathon distance, walking it, and in about 8 weeks I was feeling light. I was feeling that I learned, I got the form correct, and I could run without pain and without suffering a lot. I also got used to run jogging, right? To jog and eat at the same time. So I would buy like a bunch of bananas and be eating them very slowly, but I would eat like 6-8 bananas while doing a half a marathon. Or I would stop by a pizza place that is open 24/7. I would get a box with a medium-sized pizza, like a 12-inch pizza, and I would fold the box open and basically I would jog holding a box of pizza and eating it at the same time, and people would see that on the street and they would look at me and go like, what the fuck is this guy doing? And occasionally I would stop at a bar and have a beer, and and there are several water fountains in South Beach, so I would drink water along the way. And I did all my training at night, all of it. I would start around midnight and train until sunrise.
Because of the heat in Miami, or because you were
Because
working
I
during
was
the
training
day, or
during summer and fall, so it's very hot. And I wanted to simulate as much as possible the conditions I would have on the road. So if it was a training day, I would get busy during the day and do as much as I could. I would volunteer to help my friends carry their furniture or do whatever. I would go out or work in my car or do any crazy thing that would make me get very tired. Or I would go to the gym. There was a gym in the building. Or I would go to the gym and choose an arbitrary exercise, whatever, any exercise. And I would do just that one exercise, low weight, lots of repetitions, so I would get one muscle group really tired, but not the others, just one. So I would get tired and exhausted, and then I would start training. Because when people go out and run a little bit, they are training for the first, let's say you run 5 miles, right? So you're training for the first 5 miles of the marathon. I wanted to train for the last 5 miles. Those are the ones that you begin already exhausted.
right?
So, or I would go to a club and and dance or do anything, and just to get tired. Then I would drink a beer, have some water, buy a pizza or a big double Whopper, and hit the parks and walk and jog for the next 6 hours.
Yep.
That was training. Every other day I did that. But also I did some other things. Training day or not training day, I would make sure that I would stay on my feet for at least 8 hours a day. So I would stand up and I changed my desk to my work desk to be standing up. And even when I went to other places, I would even go to like a movie theater, and I would watch a movie from the back, standing up. I would not sit down, just to get used to it. I also learned a little bit about yoga. I didn't do yoga per se. I just learned how to read my body and do some moves to help relax. So all this was preparation to do the first run, and a lot of, I think that the mental preparation for that, I was quite advanced on that already. So I didn't need to reinvent too much. Uh, I like to joke that I used to have the mindset of Dion Carnazes, but the body of a Homer Simpson, right? So I mentally I knew how to do it.
There's not too many people that have the mindset of Dean Carnazes,
I think,
but I
yeah,
do
and I
think you
think I
might you
did.
might
I
be
think
one of them.
no, because I'm
Might,
a warrior.
yes,
That is. I didn't go through formal military training, but I went through a lot of military training.
you went
And
to you mentioned yoga, and I did hire a trainer for mine because I had 11 months to get in shape, and I like you, I
yeah,
was not a runner. But my trainer that very first week that I met her, she said, Jim, you have to go to yoga twice a
hmm
week. And at the time, I thought, what's this bullshit yoga? You're going to go there and meditate. What are we doing there? But I knew that she promised me if I did everything she told me to do, that I would run across America, a marathon a day with no injury. So she told me to go to yoga
yeah,
twice a week. So I'm going.
yeah. It definitely
And
helped me.
all that first couple classes, I was the only guy in there. The whole 11 months, I was the only guy. It was all women and me. It was at a local YMCA, and they were all in shape, and I wasn't at the beginning. And after an hour of yoga, I would be wetter. Truly, my clothes were wetter than if I had run for an hour.
Yeah,
I just couldn't believe it. So I kind of fell in love with yoga, and the stretching I carried throughout my run. I mean, I absolutely fell in love with yoga. I really did.
yeah. I have a friend that she does yoga, and she gave me a book called Yoga Beyond Belief. Um, don't remember the name of the author right now. I'll remember at some point. So Yoga Beyond Belief. So she gave me her copy of the book, and she showed me how to do some moves and how to use yoga to relax, especially to expand range of motion. I didn't do I didn't focus too much on the stretching part of it because I didn't see much gain to that. But I wanted to create a system that I could relax through the day. So I figured out that the pace that would work for me would be an hour and a half of jogging, intermittent, switching between jogging and walking, and then I would do around 15 minutes of laying down and stretching. So I would stop on the side of the road. I would put a little tarp. I had like a piece of Tyvek. I would put that on the ground or on the grass anywhere. Any park would do, right? And then I would do a little bit of just some moves that I like to do to relax. Uh, but here's the kicker. I didn't do that when I got tired. I did that when I reached 90 minutes, no matter if I'm tired or not. I discovered that in the very beginning, that if I did the stretching and the relaxing every 90 minutes, regardless of how tired I am or not tired at all, I would reach the end of the day in better shape. But if I waited until I got tired to then start relaxing and stretching and doing that sequence, then it would be miserable.
It's a
So
funny thing because there are, I don't know the figures. I'd say it's about 50-50, but there are some super, top ultra runners who don't believe in stretching at all.
I
Zero.
don't do stretching.
They
I
don't. They
don't.
don't at all.
It's just range of movement.
Right.
Just
But
playing with the
but then
joints.
there's others who swear by it, and it's religious. And,
Yeah.
and that's true pretty much not only of running, but of life in general. People think
Which
like there's one way to get in shape to run a marathon or to run across country. No, we all have different bodies. We all have different minds.
the
And we can't all train the same way. That's just, we're all unique.
the fact that some people do stretching and they are high performers and others don't do it at all and they are high performers basically proves that they are both right.
Exactly. That's
It's
exactly
the
it.
same with some do it as vegans and some do that as carnivores,
Exactly.
you know, and some do it as omnivores.
Yep.
And I think they are all correct. In when I'm doing something physically strenuous like that, or El Camino or trail, I tend to go omnivore. But when I am at home and I just want to regulate my body a little bit, or if I'm feeling a little heavy, I just go carnivore for a couple of weeks, and I eat just meat. That's it, and I feel awesome.
I
So,
was a meat eater for 61 years, and
mhm.
just this past November, I was up in Chicago with our two daughters, and they asked me to watch The Game Changers. So I watched it.
Yeah.
Powerful documentary for anybody that hasn't seen it. And both of our daughters are incredibly healthy,
Mhm.
just incredible health nuts. And boy, after watching that documentary, I said, well, I'm going to try this for 2 months. I'll give it 2 months. It'll be an experiment. And I knew it would be difficult. But I'll tell you what, it's been 4.5 months now, but I'm 100% plant based and I don't miss meat, dairy, or cheese at all. So,
I
we're all unique. But
yeah
if you had told me 6 months or a year ago that I would not eat any eggs or bacon or meat or yogurt or cheese, I would have told you you're out of your freaking mind. But
yeah,
now
that
you
is
couldn't. Now you couldn't pay me to because I feel so much better.
yeah
But we're
that
all
is
different,
not yeah no that's definitely not my system.
right?
I'm not but I'm pretty sure that if you follow a system like that and you learn its methods and its intricacies, in most cases it's going to work.
Yeah,
You know, it's going to work well. uh, and if you like meat and beer like I do, you can do carnivore. I do carnivore plus beer. That's my system. Works super well too. I and and sometimes I go omnivore because I like salads now. I discovered that I discovered that I really like salads. In recent years, I was not like that. So I don't like to go only carnivore all the time. But all these systems work. So still trying to answer your question. The first time it was that challenge, and I wanted to measure myself against something really difficult. And the only way to if you are going to use the words measure yourself, it has to be against something that you cannot be sure that you will do.
right.
The challenge has to be big enough that you cannot do it. You have to first grow into someone that may possibly do it, and then you go for it. You go with everything. Uh, because if you I tell people occasionally I am invited to talk to runners, and one of the things that I which is weird. Usually running clubs don't like me, just like I don't like running clubs, but occasionally they invite me, so it's freakish. And I explain to them that if you if you if you're training for a 5K, that's what you're going to do. If you're training for a half a marathon, you end up doing a half a marathon. You follow a program, follow a system very well, eat
Yep.
well, you do it. If you're training for a marathon, that's where you're going to do it.
Right.
But if you're training for a marathon and you go to run a 5K, you'll be able to do it, right? No big deal. But the other way around is very unlikely. If you're training for 5K and then you decide, I'm going to just start running marathons, it's probably going to be really difficult. So I said you cannot. The problem is not that you aim too high and miss. The problem is that you aim too low and hit. So the first big decision you have to make is how high you're going to aim for. So I thought I cannot train for marathon. I'll have to train for transcontinental run. And so the focus was on mental preparation, learning to get used to eat while I go. That's why the burgers and the pizzas and the bananas and the milkshakes and all that while I am on the way. I had to learn form, because if I have a running form that is incorrect, just a little bit, and you multiply that by 3,000 miles, the little bit will take you to the hospital.
It causes another injury.
Exactly. The running form has to be perfect. And that has to be all the focus on where it comes to technique, is learning, running form, and probably more than one. So you are able to switch from one form to another. So I'm pretty good at saving energy and switching from and being aware of which one form I'm doing at each time. So I can, if when one muscle group gets tired, I switch to another.
That's one thing my trainer told me, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It's true. Even if you're not an experienced runner like you were not, and I was not when we started to train, she said, Jim, two things she told me, but the main one was, if you're ever not running in good form, you need to walk. If you can't run with good form, you need to walk. Mm-hmm. And she said that holds true for now. It holds true for when you're running across country. She said, and you'll know whether or not you're running a good form. And I love that. And to this day, we see so many people out there running. And when you see the people that are really running in horrible form, of course I don't do it, but I think, God, I wish I could just talk to them and tell them what Lisa told me.
Yeah.
Just walk until you can get in good enough shape to run in good form, because you're hurting yourself, like you said. And the other thing she told me was, she said, I met her in June of 2001, and she said, Jim, after talking for like an hour, she said, do you think, she was debating whether or not to take me on as a client, to train me. And she said, do you think you're ever going to run in the Olympics? And of course I laughed and said, no. And she said, do you think you'll ever get to the point where you can make money, make your living as a runner? And I laughed again. I said, no, not a possibility, not at 45 years old. And she said, good. She said, don't ever, no matter how good a shape you're in, don't ever run faster than a 10-minute mile, ever. She said, even the last day of your run, when you're in phenomenal shape after running 3,000 miles, she said, I still don't want you to run more than a 10-minute mile. Yeah. And, I'll tell you what, I've been running since 2001, and I have never had a running injury. And I attribute a whole lot of that to those 2 points that Lisa told me. Mm-hmm. If you can't run in good form, stop and walk. Yeah. And don't ever. Now, that's not that everybody should not run faster than a 10-minute mile. She trains a lot of people who run for time. Yeah. So that's just me, because, my age
that
and
was
my
not
body.
Your game.
Exactly.
Yeah. When I was beginning my training, I went to Los Angeles to visit my friend, the same one that gave me the book about yoga, and she introduced me to a guy that he did several Ironman. And so we sat down at a bar and we began talking, and right away he asked me what I was going to do, and I said, well, I want to go Miami to Los Angeles in 100 days. That's about 100 marathons. So he asked, so you want to run 100 marathons? I said, yeah. 1 marathon a day. I said, yeah. Can't do it. That was his answer. Can't do it. I said, you're not being very encouraging. He said, no, I'll explain. You can run 1 marathon, and only 1. The other 99 will be practice. And that really set my mind. He said, all your training is practice. The first 99 are practice. The last day, you'll haul ass. Because now that day is the only day that you don't need to recover for the next day.
Right.
All the other days you have to save energy. The last day, you can be a road runner. You can go. And in fact, I went through, I started, I don't remember now the name of the city. But it was someplace just outside of downtown Los Angeles.
Santa Monica?
No, on the east side. So the last day was 17 miles. It was from there, going through downtown, and then to Venice Beach. I finished in Venice Beach. And when I approached Venice Beach, I had some friends on a Jeep, and they had cameras and all that, and a bunch of hashers were there to run with me. That last day, those last 10 miles or so, I was running so fast that most of the runners could not keep up, and the guys in the Jeep could not keep up because they had to stop at the red lights, and I would disappear, and they would catch up and position the car and do a shot, and then I would disappear again. So they gave up, and they drove to the pier and set up the cameras and waited for me there. That was fantastic. I ran like the wind blows, like Forrest Gump says. So that was the first run. The second run was completely different. I watched the movie. First I watched it Into the Wild, and then I watched The Way. In The Way, they do this Camino de Santiago pilgrimage, right, in the story. It's a great movie. Quite realistic, by the way. I really comparing the movie with what I experienced in Spain was remarkably similar. So I saw that movie and I was fascinated with the idea of doing a pilgrimage. That was it. Because all that drama that I needed to solve, the challenge, the not knowing if I'm going to survive this thing, having to learn to run, all those problems were solved. Also, during the first run, I could re-examine my entire life. I could put everything back to the design board and think about all my mistakes, all the people that I disappointed, all the crap in my life, and make the choices that would make my life different. And that worked incredibly well because in 4 months you have enough time to think about everything. You can think about every relationship, everything you learn from grade school. You can really examine your memories in a way that you cannot do in regular life. So I had an opportunity to do all those things. I didn't need to do them again. So the second one was a pilgrimage. That's why I decided to use a backpack instead of a stroller. I decided to go, I changed it, I did a similar route going back, but I changed it slightly just to visit everyone that I knew. So everyone that I could arrange to visit again. I also visit all the hashers along the way, so the drinking beer and running clubs. So I visit all the hashing groups along the way and all my friends along the way. And I ran less. I walked more and I ran less because I wanted to enjoy it a lot more. I keep remembering something that Eden said to me. That's her name, Eden. She said to me during the first time, she said, maybe you should slow down. And I said, why? She said, because you have to remember that everybody that you meet during this amazing experience, everybody that you meet, you may be meeting for the last time. And everything that you see may be the last time you see it. And that advice had a tremendous impact on me. So much that the second time very often I would see a beautiful sunrise or a nice landscape or something beautiful along the way. I would literally stop and watch it. I would stop and watch, like crossing the desert in West Texas, and then you reach a city called El Dorado in Texas. There is a tree there. I sit down, I bought some food, and I sit down across the road, and I watched a tree for more than an hour. That was the most beautiful tree ever, because it was the first tree after 2 months in the desert. but I was really enjoying it. I was enjoying every river, every tree that I saw. I would see, go through farms and they had horses and cattle, and I would run, and the horses would run along with me. All those images that you can only see in movies. Well, you can also see them in reality, but you need to go there, right? And all those moments I enjoy so much more, and that made it a true pilgrimage. So even though the route is similar, those two experiences were completely different. I would say the pilgrimage was more of a wisdom building experience or something like that. The first one was transformational, but in the sense that the person that I was before and the person that I was later were so completely different that everything in my life divided now. Everything is before the run or after the run. But when I think in those terms, before or after, I'm thinking of the first run.
Right.
The second run was a more subtle experience.
Sure. The first one, you didn't know if you'd make it or not.
Yeah.
So your whole focus had to be on making it.
Yeah, the pilgrimage is a deeper experience. It happens. It is profound, but it's happening at a much lower psychological level, in which you are savoring life more than just rediscovering who you want to be, and so it had a very different nature. After that, during El Camino was surprisingly boring. So I went there and I enjoyed, but it was good in a sense. But physically, it's too easy. So that is a problem. And second is that you're surrounded by a number of people that you keep meeting along the way because they are doing at the same pace that you are, and the conversations are terrible. It's a 3,000-year-old pilgrimage with tremendous significance, religious and psychological and historic significance. That's the opportunity to talk about amazing things. There's so much to talk about, from Greek philosophy to ancient civilizations and religion and life and the meaning of everything and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and everything in between to talk about. And everything they wanted to talk about was the World Cup and Brexit. That was it. And I start to feel that I don't want to talk to anybody. I met one guy, one friend that I made there was the only friend that I had that we really had deep conversations. We would exchange a few words and spend the next hour or two thinking about it, and then we would exchange a few more words. It was like playing chess by mail. It was a really slow conversation that lasted like 3 weeks. That was awesome. But he was faster than I was. So at some point he had to keep going faster, and because he was from London, but he's used to do trails in the Himalayas. So his capacity to walk really fast for many hours was greater than mine. Yeah. So at some point he excused himself and kept going.
Your tree experience in West Texas, that you mentioned the tree and it was so powerful. We all, and that was just one of hundreds of experiences you had, but the one that sticks out in my mind that kind of came right to me when you were talking about sitting beside that tree in West Texas was it was 114 degrees and I was running through Phoenix, Arizona.
Jeez.
And there's very little shade, and I had run all the way through southwestern Arizona with zero shade before I got to Phoenix. And it was 114 degrees this day, and there's not much shade on the roads that I was running on. Occasional tree here or there, but there was a park. And I saw a park that was almost all shaded, and I thought, well, I've got to take a break. I got to lay down on one of those picnic tables for about an hour. And there was a homeless guy on one of those picnic tables. And I intentionally sat on one of the other picnic tables. And it was just me here and this homeless guy here on the other side of the park and nobody else in the park. 114 degrees. And for whatever reason, I was drawn to go sit by him. So I went over and I said, "Hey, buddy, can I sit with you for a little bit?" He goes, "Yeah." And I sat there for like 2.5 hours. And I was 45, 45 years old. And I had never, not one time in my life, spoken to a homeless person. That was the first time in my life. Because in my mind, the way that I was raised, what I thought was these were not bad people, but they're lazy people. It's their fault they're homeless. It's amazing that I was 45 years old and thought that way, but that's what I thought of homeless people. But
Yeah.
after speaking with this gentleman for 2.5 hours, boy, did he change my entire perspective on homeless people. And that was the first month of my trip because I started on the West Coast in San Diego. And I searched out homeless people the rest of that trip across country. And to this day, I love talking to homeless people.
Something similar happened to me because I spent some nights camping. I did wild camping most of the time, but on a few occasions I camped like just out of town or in parks or some like in forests, in parks where there were other people there. Some of them were, most of them were homeless, but there was one day exactly on the border between Texas and Louisiana. There is a bridge. There's this river, not much of a river, but there is a river there and this bridge, and before the bridge there is a gas station. So I went there, bought some beers, bought a 6-pack, and went over the bridge, and then right after there is a little trail that goes by a tiny kind of a beach on the river, and there was a guy there sitting. He was camping already, and he was sitting there listening to some music on his phone, and he was covered with tattoos, but not funny, nice tattoos. They were prison tattoos. If you have seen tattoos enough in your life, you learn to recognize them. So I thought, all right, this is going to be interesting. So I went there, started talking to him, and offered a beer, and he offered me some food, and we kept talking for a couple hours. And he told me that he was in jail, and then he left somewhere like Minnesota, something like that, and then he walked to Louisiana, hoping to find a job there, but it wasn't great. So he thought, I'll go to West Texas, where apparently there is a lot of jobs in the oil fields. And I told him, yeah, you're absolutely right. You have so much to do because they are hiring anybody that can stand, that can stand still over there. It's amazing. And then I set up my camping and spent the night there with a guy that was, if not a fugitive, not far from it. I would say he was probably running away. But it was one of the most amazing conversations. But I think I discovered that just before my first run, because I was traveling by motorcycle before. And I met a lot of people that were, again, they would just stop the motorcycle in the desert or somewhere. And then you stop your motorcycle and you say, hey, would you mind sharing the campground? And usually they welcome you. I wouldn't say usually. It's every time, because I never met another biker that would say, oh no, leave me alone. No, they always welcome you. They want to share some food, or some weed or some drinks. And so I discovered these, I wouldn't say homeless. You're not really homeless when you're traveling and camping by motorcycle.
No.
But you are a misfit. Those people are clearly misfits. And now I think that my home very often, and definitely my boat when I move into the boat in another couple of years, if everything goes well, I'll be living on a boat. I like to say that my living room is the most interesting living room in the world. because usually there are people there telling stories, just like, or we make a fire in the back, and we sit around the fire drinking and talking. And the people that are there are usually bikers, sailors, runners, criminals, prostitutes, politicians, misfits, homeless. You see the pattern? It's all the weirdos, all the weird people.
They have the
'Cause
best
they
stories.
have all the good stories.
They have the best stories, exactly.
All the best stories.
Normal people are boring, and we don't want to sit around the campfire with them.
The people that you're not going to find there is accountants, is software developers, and the people that don't have something weird about them.
Right.
You know, well, they may be accountants and software developers, but they would have to have something else about their life that is really unusual. Yeah. And most of my friends are very unusual.
What I found out,
which means that probably you are a freak too. You know.
We all are. We're all freaks. There are no normal people. Yeah. Normal's is setting on a dryer, and that's all it is, you know. Yeah. But I have no doubt. I am so fortunate that I met and chose to talk to that homeless man in Phoenix for 2.5 hours. Because I spoke to hundreds since then, hundreds. And I have zero doubt, and this irritates some people when I say it, but if I were born in their situation and I had all of their life experiences, I would be exactly where they are.
Yeah.
I believe that with all my heart.
Yeah.
And you, Milton, who I've never met in person, if you were born and had their exact same life experiences, there's about a 99.9% chance you would be a homeless person too.
Yeah.
And once you understand that and you realize that most of us, or a lot of us, are just sperm lucky, that's what I call it, we're sperm lucky. You know, I could have been born into a horrible family like some people are, not their choice.
Yeah.
They don't have near the opportunities to do what Milton Miller's done or Jim McCord's done. They don't have those opportunities.
And a lot of and a number of them are not there because of simple, predictable reasons.
No.
Like that.
It's life experiences that happen.
Yeah. Some of them are geniuses. Some of them are professionals. I met homeless people that were writers and engineers, and you know, some of them had problems with drugs, but not all of them. Some of them were troubles with being the military and getting fucked up.
Right.
You know, some of them went to prison once, and after that they cannot get a job. You know, they don't have skills that are specific enough that a company will want them regardless. You know, the reasons that get people into the street are many.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons that is a problem so difficult to solve. Because any formula that you apply to that will only solve one section of it. You know, will not solve it all.
If I could talk tomorrow for 3 hours to Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Michael Jordan, you name it, Rich Roll, you know, Dean Karnazes, Milton Miller, or a homeless person, I'm going to take the homeless person every time, because I'm going to get stories that I'm not going to be able to get anywhere else. And you don't know how many, I'm sure some of the stories I've heard over the years are complete bullshit, but I would be willing to bet the majority of them are honest, true stories. And when you hear those life experiences, those people will speak the truth. They don't have any false pretenses they have to put forward. They don't have to act like anything. Like most people, in at least in America, have this presence. They have to act like they're successful or they're intelligent or whatever. These people don't have that. So when you get this straight scoop from them and you understand the life experiences they've been through, it's just, it's phenomenal. I mean, it really is, and it's life-changing. And I've asked a lot of people who question me on that. I say, hey, if you don't believe me, just stop the next 9 or 10 homeless people that you see and say, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And about 50 or 60% of them are going to say no, because there's a lot of mental illness in the homeless population.
Yeah.
and some of them don't want to, and those are even sadder cases. But you don't want to speak to somebody who doesn't want to speak to you, but 40 or 50 or 60% will. And they love it because people don't stop and talk to the homeless people. They turn their eyes and they look the other way, like I did for 45 years. And but when a homeless person who doesn't have that mental illness has the opportunity to talk to somebody who's not homeless, they love it, and it's truly more life-changing for me than anybody I've talked to in my entire life.
Something that I remember now, I want to know if it happens to you. I drove from Los Angeles to Miami about a year after I did my run, my second run. So I got a car in Los Angeles and drove it to Miami. And I did exactly the same route. Two things happened. One, the entire time I was looking to see if I would meet anybody that was running across, because I wanted to stop and talk to them. And unfortunately I didn't meet a single one. No, not by coincidence, because there are always people on the road, but I didn't see a single one. But the other thing is that I don't know if you drove your route later, but what happened to me is that every time that I stopped somewhere and I was looking at the places and I was driving through it, the more I did it, the worse it got. I was screwing up my memories. So I would stop and look at it, and I was having a harder time believing that I did it. Yeah. I knew that I did it. Like, I knew statistically and factually, yeah, I have been through this place, I recognize this house, I recognize this landmark, so I know I was here. But the connections of my memories were getting all screwed up because the first two times I did it at 3 miles per hour. And now I was doing it at 50 miles per hour, and that was scrambling everything. So after I reached Austin, I got out of my route, and then I drove highways all the way to Miami, and I avoided my route, and I promised myself to never drive that way again. So if I'm going to visit my friends that live there, usually I'll take the highways and then drive south to visit them, but I will not take the same roads.
Just this past February, Milton, I was visiting our daughter who lives in Juarez, Mexico. Uh-huh. And I love the Southwest. The Southwest is my favorite part of our country. And when I visit her in Juarez, I don't fly to El Paso, which is right across the border. I fly into Phoenix so I can rent a car and drive, because I love driving in the Southwest. So, it's like the fourth time I visited her there. And this time I decided to do exactly what you said. Instead of taking the expressways from Juarez back to Phoenix, I decided to go up 25 and then go from Socorro all along Route 60 all the way through New Mexico and Arizona to Phoenix. Mm-hmm. So I did that. And I exact same thing that you. I'm looking for runners, and I did not find a runner, but I did pass a bicyclist. And what I don't think I told you, I have it in my chapter, but when I was 20 years old, I bicycled from the East Coast to the West Coast. So anytime I see a long-distance bicyclist, I always stop them. So I'm on Route 60, and there's, I pass a guy with full set of panniers and a sleeping bag and a tent on top of his panniers. So I pulled over and, and waited for him to ride up to me. And I had cold water. I had a cooler full of water. I had sandwiches. Not for me, but I was hoping I'd run into somebody. Yeah. So we ended up bullshitting for a couple hours, and it was just a true joy. Yeah. But the other experience you mentioned, that it's not the same. It isn't. And the best example I can give you is on that same day driving through New Mexico. If you haven't been there, it's worth a trip sometime. It's called the Valley of the Big Array. There's like 35 huge satellite dishes in this incredible valley that's 35 miles square and flat in the middle of the desert. And this organization put these 35 or 40 satellite dishes up like 30 or 40 years ago, and they searched the skies 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constantly searching for messages from outside of our planet. And I had no idea that existed. But when I was running across, I ran through that valley of the Big Array, and I spent a night right in the middle of that valley in the RV. And my 16-year-old son was driving the RV for me at the time, and we slept on top of the RV. And he was only 16, so I'm sure he had drank beer before, but I never let him drink around me. But that night, we drank our first beer together. I went and bought a 12-pack of beer. I said, Jimmy, we're going to drink a 12-pack together. And we were on top of the RV in the valley of the Big Array. And it was unbelievable, Milton. It was a night of meteor showers.
Wow.
So Jimmy and I are laying out in the valley of the Big Array. There's not a light anywhere. You can't see a light anywhere, any direction. Perfectly clear sky and meteor showers all night. And my son and I are getting drunk together for the first time. You talk about a phenomenal memory. So,
it is something he'll never forget.
And neither will he. Well, 2 months ago, just in February, I was down there driving back. And of course, I'm going to stop at the Valley of the Big Array. And I did. And boy, what a letdown. Yeah. What a letdown, because I just didn't have any of the feelings that I remembered how powerful that night was. It was not even the same, I mean, the satellites weren't as big. Of course, they were exactly the same size. The sky wasn't as big. And I waited there until it got dark to see that sky, and it wasn't as beautiful. Mm-hmm. So it kind of, I'm not going to say it ruined the first experience, but I agree. It's not a good idea to revisit those phenomenal experiences, because it just might dampen your experience a little bit.
You need to do that in such a different way that it's not going to match it.
Yeah.
So even if you visit the same place, then it has to be with a new person, or that's one thing that I learned hosting a lot of people, because I have been couch surfing for years, and I participate in several networks where people very often they come to visit and they stay at my place. So much that I built a little dorm room in the house, like a hostel. So it looks like a hostel. In one of the rooms, it has 4 bunk beds and a kitchen that people share and stuff like that. So pretty much
like a bed and breakfast, or like a hostel, like a hostel,
just for free. That's the difference.
Yep.
So I have that set up here, and very often people come over and look. Miami is a really interesting and fun place to visit. It's an amazing place. But after living here for 10, 11 years, of course I have seen it all dozens of times, right? So for me to go from here to South Beach means nothing. Or if I go into the Everglades, means nothing. But when someone new comes in and I bring that person to South Beach or to the Everglades or anything like that, I feel their enthusiasm. And that is a way that I can re-experience that, but I have to do it through their eyes. That is possible. So I would say, if one day I went to the valley and there were the satellite dishes and all that, and I did that with my son, I would do it again, but I would do that either with a stranger or another son. I would make another kid, I don't know, or with someone else, like I did several motorcycle trips across Europe, and I did them with different girls with me. But 2 of those trips I did alone. So the first one was a lot of fun because it was the first one. The second one was boring as fuck. It didn't mean anything because I didn't have someone with me to enjoy it, to experience that. So I feed, in that sense, I am an extrovert. I really feed out of other people's enthusiasm. It is very important to me.
Back to, you mentioned the book that we all wrote, 27 of us. Mm-hmm. And of course, I think we're all excited to have our names in that book and our stories and our adventures. But Milton, don't you wish, like you mentioned, the book that you read, and the only book that I could find before I ran across country was Meditations from the Breakdown Lane, Jim Shapiro's book. And I couldn't find any other ones, so that was the only one. But wouldn't that have been a gold mine if you or I went on Google and found a book where 27 different people had run across America? And we had, so I'm so excited
I
that our book will live on, and it's going to inspire people who have thought about that and thought, oh my God, I can never do that. Because as you well know, some of the probably about half of the people who ran across the country or walked were phenomenal athletes. I
yeah,
wasn't one, you weren't one, but about half of them are. But the other
yeah,
half were people like you and me that weren't runners at all.
yeah.
And so
Uh,
for our book to be able to inspire future men and women, boys, girls, whatever.
I don't
It,
know if you're going to like my answer. Did you ever hear that quote that says that the there are only two really bad things can happen to you. One is getting what you want. One is not getting what you want, and the other is getting what
getting
you
what you
want,
want.
right?
Yeah.
Because all the joy is in the struggle, right? I think that there are two ways, two ideal ways to do this. If you are planning to, if you're listening to this conversation and you are planning to do it, one is to read a lot about it. I would say a book like our book would be amazing, and also read books on ultra running, some other authors, and Born to Run. I always recommend that. But there is another way that is awesome, which is don't read anything.
Sure.
Don't do anything. Just or read just one.
Well, and
But
I think the advantage to that is those people who wouldn't have any interest in learning from our experiences, they wouldn't even search the book out in the first place,
yeah,
and
but
they shouldn't,
yeah,
because that would ruin the trip for them, because they want to have all those experiences on their own
yeah,
without knowing up front.
yeah.
But
But I
for the
think
people
that that
who want to know what they're getting into,
yeah,
because your experiences weren't exactly like mine. Not no two people in that book have the same experiences run across the country. They're all
exactly.
completely, so it's not gonna spoil the surprise for anybody.
Yeah, but I think the benefit, the greatest benefit of this book is something else. It's running, specifically running across America is a I call it a fetish run. It's so unusual that many people will read and be inspired to do other things.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that is going to be the greatest value of it. Someone is interested in building their own airplane, or the other one wants to build, to drive through the Americas on a bus, or some other people want to climb a mountain,
Right.
it will be, I think it may become the kind of book that people will say that they want to do something, and a friend is going to tell, okay, but before you do, please read this book, like my friend did to me. That's what I believe will happen, and that will be a great impact.
Yep.
Yeah,
You had mentioned earlier that you had talked about two people that you spoke to that you said you were going to run across America, and they both said, "Yep, Milton will do that." Yeah. My first two people that I told was my closest friend. His name was Jamie, and we were in his backyard and we were drinking beer, and I said, I got to tell you what I'm going to do in 11 months. He goes, well, Mac, what are you going to do? My friends call me Mac. And I said,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to run across the country. And he said, what did you say?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm going to run from the West Coast to the East Coast. He goes like this. He said, wait a minute. And I said, okay. And he ran inside and he got his wife and he brought her out, and he said, hey, Mac, tell Nancy what you're going to do. And I think the reason he did that was I was 248 pounds. I was not a runner. I was way out of shape. And he said, can you tell Nancy what you're going to do? And so I did. I told Nancy what I was going to do. And they both kind of looked at me like, well, and like you, I guess your friends knew you. They said, well, you probably will, but how do you plan on doing it? So I won't go into the rest of the story. And then the next people I told were our four kids. I got our four kids all together.
Well,
And
I was
and
a notorious couch potato, so most of my friends only got the news via Facebook, and I got a lot of comments in private, like they didn't believe it.
right.
But but they also didn't discourage or anything. You know, they just like, oh really? but one of my friends that we are friends for a long time, and Carlos, he said, I think you will, because you are the most stubborn motherfucker I know. So, all right. I guess that's a compliment then. but yes, I was a couch potato. You were a couch potato, and I think that is a great value on that, because people can look at that and they think, "Wow, if he can do it, then I can do it." You know, it's different than when they see a Lance Armstrong or Dean Karnazes or something like that. Well, that guy is a super athlete anyway. You know, when Dean Karnazes said that he was going to run across again, I was like, all right, what's, you know, I expect him to do that. There is nothing new here. But if I know someone that never did anything athletic, anything seriously athletic, that would be a great story to tell.
And I'll tell you, Milton, one of my favorite things to do at a marathon, and it's the only way I'll watch a marathon. It's the only way. And I tell people who have never, even if you're not interested in running, if you're not a runner and you never plan on running a marathon, go to an organized marathon where there's thousands of runners, and don't go to the beginning and don't go to the end. You need to bring a chair and park yourself somewhere between mile 21 and 22. And don't even go for the first 2 hours, because all you're going to see is these incredible athletes just running by. How boring is that? It's like watching golf. You know, who cares to watch these incredible athletes running by at a marathon? But park yourself at mile 20, 21, or 22 at about 3 hours into the run, and stay there for the next 4 or 5 hours. Because from like hour 3 on, you're going to see the first timers, the people that had no idea what they were getting into. And the amazing thing, it'll inspire anybody, even a non-runner, so much, is because almost none of them give up. You know, they call it the wall when you hit that mileage, you know, where you just, you 5 more miles seems like an impossibility. And you see people that are walking and they're all bent over, and you see people that are throwing up, and you see people that are crying just like in tears because they're in so much pain. But what you almost never see is somebody giving up.
Yeah.
You just don't see it. And that's the fun part of going to a marathon, not going to the end. Even the end at hour 6, 7, or 8, when those people are finishing, because by that time they're done and they're excited and they have a little more energy and they can run. There's nothing exciting about that. But to see them at their worst point in their life in that marathon, when they're crying and they're puking and they don't give up, that is so inspiring.
The hashers, they do a little thing on mile 22 here, and so we go there, and you know, to watch the people going by, and we offer them beer. So we give away beer. It's pretty impressive what you see. I only ran one organized marathon. Actually, a friend of mine trying to introduce me to a group that they are like ultra runners and multi-marathon runners, something like that. And one of the rules to join the group is that you have to have ran at least 10 marathons, or something like that, some big number. And so he introduced me, and they didn't approve me because I only ran one organized marathon, you know. And my friend was saying, but this guy did like 200 marathons, you know, like in distance, you know, but they were not official events, so they didn't care. So I don't want to participate on a group that thinks that way anyway. But when I only ran one organized marathon, and that was a Miami marathon. Then I ran wearing a kilt and smoking a cigar. But I remember around mile 10 or so, a guy passed me by, just a little faster than I was. But he kept going, and he had that T-shirt that says, 50 years old, fat, diabetic, ahead of you. And I love that. It was so much fun to see a guy with that spirit
Yep.
and going
Yep.
through. And some people do that kind of thing. Uh, I want to tell you a story, but I want to close with it. So, is there anything else that you would like to that we should cover today?
No,
I tell that
I
story?
started out with the apology, and for not coming down to meet you on your first run. And there
We'll
will
do
not
that.
there will not be another apology, because I will be coming down to Miami, and I will
Okay.
be staying with you for a couple nights. And that's a promise and a commitment. And I cannot wait.
Cool, cool. That would be great.
Yeah,
That would
but
be great.
no, not only am I thrilled, but we are all thrilled, Milton, that you have a chapter in this book, because
It's
you're a unique character.
it's a beautiful book. It's
Yeah,
going
and
to
the unique
it's going
stories
to
is
be
what.
inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't it be a boring book if everybody was like Jim McCord or Pete Kostelnick or Sandra Valendez or whatever? If all the stories were all the same, but they're not. There's 27 incredibly unique stories, and you have. I love the way you wrote your chapter. So
Well, it's definitely better than my book alone because I don't actually like my book that much. I think it is I think my book is a great practice run for my next book, but standing alone, I don't like it, and that's that problem that most authors have, that they end up not liking their own creation.
oh, I tell you, I'll stop you
Uh,
for a second, because of the 27 chapters, now I've read them all. I don't know if you have, but I have. I like mine the least. I wish I could go back and rewrite mine. It's like, God damn, these guys wrote some really good shit in here. So
yeah.
I'm with you. I think mine is the most boring chapter.
Yeah, no, mine. I don't think it's boring. I think that my material is exciting in a way. I just don't think that my technique, my that I don't think I'm a very good writer yet. I have a friend that he has an incredible experience. His name is Mike Baum, and he visited every country in the world backpacking. It took some 26 years to do that.
Yeah, you talked about him
And
earlier.
he wrote a book that I was standing in awe of. Well, everything he writes. Like, he wrote some other things that he sent me in private to read, and he sent me the his book before he released it, so I saw a preprint version of it that has some parts that the printed one doesn't. Um, but his technique, his style, when I compare the way he writes with the way I write, I feel like I am a teenager in comparison. Like, I feel that my skills are not near that. Uh,
Well, I'll tell you this.
but with
I
time,
am sure.
it will
I'm
get
sure
there.
the majority of people that are ordering our book are not looking for great writing styles. You know what I mean? So I don't think either one of us has to worry about that. If
Yeah,
they're looking
totally
for great
right.
writing
Yeah,
styles, they're going to go for the great authors,
yeah, you're
not for
totally
a
right.
cross America on foot.
Actually, I'm waiting for my printed book, and I decided to not read anything until I get the printed book. Because I don't know, that's the way my mind works. I
I
like.
didn't get it yet either. I ordered
Yeah.
6 of them and they come tomorrow. I can't believe I didn't order next day delivery. I ordered them on Tuesday, and my 6 books are coming
Cool,
tomorrow. So I
cool.
can't wait to get it.
Well, let me tell you that story that I really want to share with you, because it's something that happened around Cincinnati. It was in 2010. I was riding a motorcycle from Los Angeles to. Well, I did a trip from Boston to Miami, another one from Miami to Los Angeles, and then I was riding from Los Angeles to Boston at that time. And my next stop was Cincinnati. I was coming from Indianapolis on a big motorcycle, and In middle of the afternoon, I noticed that I was on the highway and I noticed that the traffic was normal on my side. But suddenly, there was no traffic on the other side. Nothing. Nothing. And it was like that for a while. And then I saw an helicopter and some emergency vehicles, and then after that, of course, a huge
Accident.
congestion. The accident, and then a huge miles and miles of cars parked. And the helicopter was off; it was not turning. And they don't turn the helicopter off if they think that, unless they think that it's going to take a while, right? So that's already a bad sign. And then there was this big semi, and behind the semi there was what probably used to be a pickup truck.
Mm.
Or an SUV, something like that. It was impossible to recognize the vehicle. I could only tell that it used to be white.
Mm.
And half of the vehicle was under the truck. And I slowed down. The traffic, of course, people were rubbernecking, so it slows down, and I could take a peek. And I could see that there were 3 bodies on the side of the road already covered, and they were processing that to transport. And there were 5 or 6 firefighters on top of that car trying to cut it open to remove the driver. If the driver was dead, they wouldn't be trying that way or that frantically. They wouldn't be working that way. So there was still a chance that they would save that one. And I spent the rest of the ride all the way to Cincinnati thinking about this. What could be in his mind? I'm presuming that was a guy. What could possibly be going through his mind at that moment? Possibly. Do you think there is any chance he was thinking about his 401k or his career choices, his mortgage,
Nope.
his education? Is there any chance that he was thinking about the economy, the politics,
Nope.
these damn liberals fucking up everything? Was there any chance that he was thinking about his favorite football team? No. There are only 2 things that I think are likely that he could possibly be thinking about. One is wondering about the other 3 people, because very likely they were family, they were people that he loved. So it's possible that if he was conscious, he could be wondering what happened to them. And the other possible thing is, I want more time. I want to get out of this one. That's how. Imagine being in a situation one day where all you can think of, all you can desperately want is more time. If you internalize that, you will never waste any time for any reason. You will cut anyone that comes to talk to you with bullshit, with pointless conversation. You may do that politely, like you do, or abruptly, like I usually do. But you will cut that conversation right away because you don't have time for that.
Live every moment like it's your last. Yep.
If you internalize that, plus a message like Eden told me, remember, everyone you meet, you may be meeting for the last time. So what I like to close the conversation with is the wish, the sincere wish that you, and by you I mean you listening to this podcast, I hope you become very aware of your own death. Because if you do, for real, if you really become aware that you may have a day soon that is not 24 hours long, and that day is going to suck, then you will use the time you have today a lot better. And when you meet someone, you're going to hug them tighter. You're going to kiss them with more love. You're going to dedicate to others with more compassion. And you're going to pursue your own dreams with more energy and understanding that you may not be there to reach the end of them. That's it.
Great story. It's phenomenal. Love it.
I hope that is something
Valuable
that comes
words.
out of this story.
Valuable.
That's it, man. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you. And I hope it happens more.
It will.
Next
it will.
time in Miami.
I promise you.
All right.
Thanks, Milton.
Okay, then. Thank you so much.
See you, brother.
We hope you like this podcast as much as we like to produce it. This has been made possible by the efforts of dozens of volunteers, supporters, partners, and visionaries that are helping us build Forager's World. Please visit our website,